Welcome to Wealth Well Done. Together, we'll cover a wide range of important topics surrounding money and the impact it has on our lives. From the sophisticated and highly valuable planning techniques of the ultra-wealthy to the commonly underutilized biblical teachings. Together, we'll work to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well. Here's your host, Eric Scoville.
All right, welcome to the 92nd episode of the Wealth Well Done podcast, where we are examining tactical, practical, and biblical ways to help you do your wealth well done. Last week, I announced that we are going to be bringing the show to an end for the most part. There might be some straggler episodes that continue to happen, but we are going to end the weekly production of this show. And we are on the last 10 episodes here, including the very last episode with Isaac Schafer, and I'm not going to give him any other titles besides Isaac Schafer this time, just because it's the last one. All right, so last week we were talking about the pursuit of wealth and knocking down maybe some errors in theology around that. The pursuit of wealth for the sake of wealth is certainly an issue, but the pursuit of wealth for the sake of God can absolutely be corrected. You've got slippery slopes ditched on both sides of that. This week, we are going to pick up a topic that actually came up a couple times in the conversation for last week as well. But this is about staying dependent on God. And there are a number of instances in the Bible. I grabbed a few of them here just for reference, but there are a number of instances in the Bible where the Lord really makes it clear that we are to stay dependent on him. And you've got the Israelites in the wilderness. God gives them daily manna. And so they are to get one day's worth of manna, unless this is the day before the Sabbath, in which they're to get 2 days worth of manna. And to the point where the manna will rot if you grab more than what you'll eat in one day. They went through the wilderness in the desert and they got their water out of a rock. Like they needed God. They were dependent on him. Elijah and Brook, Lord sends him to Brook and says that I've commanded the ravens to feed you there. Again, completely reliant upon the Lord. We have Solomon, Proverbs, one of the more famous Proverbs of chapter 3, verse 5 and 6 to, make sure I say that right. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. And so, and he will make your path straight, or depending on which version you read, in all your ways submit to him. And so again, this idea that we are to be completely reliant, submitted to the Lord. Jesus in the Lord's Prayer gives us this idea of asking for our daily bread. The example of I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Then we have grab one from Paul, where he said, talking about the Lord said to me that my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. And so I want to just throw that out there and kind of open up the idea, Isaac, of what does it mean to stay dependent on the Lord, and why is that so important to him? Why is that so good for us?
I mean, I don't see why that's so difficult.
Everyone's got that episode. We've got this.
Stay dependent on him because he told you so. I mean, aren't we done here?
My brain doesn't work quite that well.
Well, let's unpack that, Aaron. How does your brain work?
Yeah, lots of pride. Why stay dependent on the Lord? Why does God command us to do that? And by the way, just since this last episode, I love the fact that I can take the things that I don't understand and just lob them out to you, and you have no idea what's coming, and you just always give brilliant answers. So I just want to come on air and say I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. I appreciate the challenge of trying to come up with wise answers on the spot. It's fun. It is a lot of fun. It grows my dependence on him and my trying to maintain humility while giving those answers, because it's like, okay, if there's going to be other people listening to this, and it's just not just me and you kind of experimenting around with things, like I need to actually rely on the wisdom that the Lord is giving me, not earthly wisdom. So it stretches my spiritual gifts, which is good. So what was the question?
So why is staying dependent on God? Why does God want us to stay dependent on him?
I think the most foundational answer to that is because it's truth. And the Lord wants his people walking in the light of truth. And so if the Lord were to not care whether we stay dependent on him, that would be allowing us to live in a lie. And he does not appreciate when his people live in lies.
Okay. So unpack that a little bit further.
Yeah. I mean, so if, let's go even one level deeper. Why does the Lord give us commands? Right? He gives us commands not because he wants to restrict us from things. He gives us commands because he wants to free us into truth and real freedom and flourishing in how he's created us to be.
He knows best. It's what's best for us, whether we think so or not.
Yeah. There's a reason why God is called the potter or the creator. It's because he made us, so he happens to understand the owner's manual about how we're supposed to operate and the best way for us to operate. And ultimately, it comes down to our interaction with him. God's original design was for us to be a part of his family. And if you have a family, you understand that there are good ways for families to operate and there are bad ways for families to operate, right?
Yep.
And everybody in the family has a role. And sometimes that can look different from person to person or whatever that may be, but you have a role and something to execute with and a way to act within that relationship so that the family functions and flourishes properly for the benefit of everybody, not just for the benefit of one.
Okay.
Right. And so in general, God's commands are always for our freedom and for our flourishing. Okay. So that's the basic foundation for any command. In this particular case, the command to be reliant on him stems from the foundational truth that everything we have and everything we do, whether that be physical assets, spiritual assets, material assets, whatever it may be, all of them come from him. And there's ultimately very little that we can do to control our lives, to actually control our lives. And so if he didn't command us to stay reliant on him and we were allowed to think that we actually have control and we can rely on ourselves, that is not setting us up for flourishing, because eventually we're going to hit the brick wall of reality where, oh, wait a second, I can't control that. I can't actually provide for myself. I'm not self-dependent because guess what? I screw up a lot.
Right.
So I need to be dependent on him. That's why he commands us to be dependent on him, because we happen to need it.
It's in our best interest. So, because without that, the Tower of Babel seems confusing no matter what, but especially without that, because here we have him saying nothing will be held back from them. Or what's he actually?
Nothing will be impossible.
Nothing will be impossible for them.
Yeah, it depends on the translation, but sure, it's pretty close.
Sure. And so he scrambles the languages, and at that point there takes another drastic step to keep us dependent on him, when it seems like humans have it figured out. You're saying that even though it seemed like we had it figured out, the reality was God, being all-knowing, sees what's around the corner there, that in that feeling like we have it all within ourselves, destruction is around the corner.
Yeah. If he would have allowed, because humans in general are capable of incredible things, and God made us that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He made us with the ability to actually do a lot of things for ourselves. It probably sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but he gave us the ability to do a lot of things. He gave us brilliant minds to be able to figure out problems that nothing else in creation can figure out.
Right.
At least in physical creation can figure out. So when humanity tends to get on a roll of getting things quote unquote right and advancing human civilization, etc. If we just want to take the Tower of Babel, for instance, like they were making the greatest city that has ever been created. And it was all for their self-interest. And it was all for their self-dependence. And it was all pointing back to their greatness. And so Yahweh says, when Yahweh says nothing will be impossible for them, he's not saying that they'll be able to do anything. He's basically saying there that the end of the evil that they are capable of is non-existent. Right? Not like nothing will be impossible for them, as in like they will, if I allow them to keep going further, they will continuously be pursuing evil all the time.
Okay.
And continually getting better at evil. Nothing will be impossible for them. He's not. See, some people read Genesis 6 be like, oh, well, God all of a sudden got scared that humanity was going to overthrow him. Like, no, that's not what's happening there. God in his sovereign mercy says, no, like it's my mercy now that I judge you, because if I don't judge you now, there's no coming back from this.
Yeah.
There's no coming back.
Okay.
There's always an element of mercy in God's judgment.
Yeah.
Always. I preached a message about that a while ago.
Okay. All right. Let's switch gears into another parable I've talked about plenty here. The parable of the rich fool. So starting, I'm going to read this out of Luke. It's also in Matthew there. I'm going to read this out of Luke, starting in verse 13. So someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, this is Jesus saying this, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And then there's the backdrop. And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns." And so therefore, it's not that he had nowhere to store his crops. His current barns were full and he had nowhere to store his additional crops. "So I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God."
Such a good part.
Love that. Okay. I have ample goods for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. And I'm continually hard on America. I love America, but I'm hard on it. This sounds a lot like American retirement.
It's any wealthy country.
It is. It's any wealthy country. This sounds a lot like the dreams of wealthy countries in retirement.
I was literally just about to say, like, before you even say anything, you just finished the parable. I was about to say, it's almost as if our idea of retirement is a very quick route to significant judgment from the Lord.
So
I'm not going to say a quick route to hell, because that's the Lord's decision. However,
is God against retirement?
It depends on what you mean by retirement.
Okay. Well, let's get specific here, because I want this to be practical, not just theological. I want this to apply. So, I'm 62 years old and I have blank amount of assets left. And it's, based off of, I've gone with my financial advisor and done the calculations to understand that if I'm using a 4% safe rate of withdrawal, then I can draw, and just for the record there, that would be like if I have $1 million and I take off 4% of that a year, that's $40,000. So if I take $40,000, add that to my pension or Social Security or other investment income, anything else like that, I can feel confident that I've got 30 plus years of runway there. So I have done the math to understand that I likely will not run out of money at my current rate of consumption plus any goals that I have. And therefore I have ample goods, and I can now say to my soul to relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Mm-hmm. So that type of retirement, 62, I can stop working and I can just live off of the wealth that I have stored up.
Is the Lord against that?
Is the Lord against that?
Yes.
Oh, you just caused a big rift in all of American. This is the American dream, and you're just blowing it up. Okay. Why?
Because the heart behind that exact scenario, the heart behind that is consumption. And consumption is not a bad thing, but the heart behind that is, I have stored up all of this for myself, and so now I'm going to draw off of it so that I don't have to work anymore. It is comfort and consumption. It is not a growth and stewardship mindset like the Lord lays out in the parable of the talents. And he even indicates that in the parable when he basically says, actually, I wonder if you could read the part where the Lord judges him. He said, "You fool." Start there.
"Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?"
That. The things that you have prepared, whose will they be? Because the Lord was basically saying, you built these larger barns so that you could have more and so that you could consume it. And the Lord says, now you're dead. Whose are they going to be now? Right. And the reading between the lines there, it basically means these weren't supposed to be yours to consume anyway. Why didn't you use the grain to sell to other people and feed them, to plant even bigger fields, to pass on those bigger fields down to your children? Or if you didn't have children, give it to the community. Say, hey, guess what? You need some farmland? Here, take some of my land. Here's some seeds. Go plant your own farm. Yeah. So the Lord's saying, okay, if you're thinking that all of these resources are for your own consumption, I'm going to take them from you and distribute them myself anyway, because that's what you should have done. But since you're choosing not to partner with me in executing your assets the way that I want you to, you're not going to get the opportunity to do that. You're done.
Yeah. This night, your soul is required of you.
This night it's required from you. And what's going to happen to the things that I gave you? Him saying, since you have decided to not do what I want you to do with the things that I've gave you, I'm not going to give you the chance to do it.
And so as we look at going to be a little bit stereotypical here of American retirement, when we go to this route, we see someone who has got up and gone to work 5 days a week, had a purpose, had something in mind. And whether it's when they actually retired and stopped going to work, or when they mentally, figuratively retired. And, we live at the home of Caterpillar, the former home of Caterpillar. And you have lots and lots of employees who, as they near their retirement, have found themselves, they make too much money. Caterpillar won't fire them or move them down for someone else who's younger and hungrier and more talented. But they just are going to sit on this and ride out the last 5 years of their career and try to not get in trouble, not get fired or something else like that.
3 to 5 years is kind of like, in my understanding, just the cutoff of like, okay, I'm almost done.
Yeah.
Been here long, and Caterpillar or anywhere else.
Anywhere else, right. Yeah.
I've been here long enough where it doesn't really matter. Even if I get fired early, my, financial planner said I have enough where, hey, if I added 5 years to my retirement, no big deal. So I'm just going to coast.
Right.
Yeah. So the attitude starts even before people retire.
Yeah. But then when that happens, we see tremendous health declines. And so whether it is they actually die that night or they start to rot, I wonder, I'm thinking back to Jesus speaks to the tree when he curses the fig tree, and he curses the tree. They go into town. They walk back from town that night. They don't say anything, but the next morning when they walk back into town, they say, look, it dried up from the roots. And it's almost like they are dying. When people go into this, I am going to cut off my productivity and start to just consume for my own self-interest here, that they start dying from the roots.
Well, they are dying, not just physically, but they're dying spiritually, because they are forsaking the first and most basic command that the Lord gave to humanity: work the ground and keep it. It's like, okay, it's not just that it's something that's good. It's something that the Lord designed us to do. And whenever you don't live your life in the way that the Lord designed it, you will decline both spiritually and physically. Like, it will just happen.
Okay. So how do we do this? So I'm 82 years old, and I don't know anyone that wants to hire me. I don't have that much energy. I'm not good at the internet anymore. Or, so what do I do? Isaac,
Yeah, it has nothing to do with your job. But quite frankly, I fully hope to, quote unquote, retire by the time I'm, 50. Like, the earlier that you can, quote unquote, retire and not have to work for your money, the better. If the end result of that is that now all of your effort, like if you actually don't have to work to provide for your family, And with that freedom, you pour all of that effort into figuring out how to maximize your resources, both financial and otherwise, to build the kingdom. Then good for you. It's almost the same concept as when Paul talks about, whether people should get married or not. It's like in many ways, we are married to our jobs. We're married to the things that provide for our family. And so, Paul says like, hey, if your, spouse dies, or if you end up getting divorced, like I would encourage you not to remarry, because now you don't have that distraction anymore. You can just pour yourself into the kingdom. I would say that that's the case for our jobs. Like, okay, I don't have to work anymore. Like, I no longer have that distraction.
Right.
I'm going to pour all of my resources and effort and intelligence into maximizing and growing what the Lord gave me during that time I had a job, and pour as much of it as I can into the kingdom. Whether that's at my local church, whether that's partnering with organizations nationally, internationally, whether that's pouring into my family, like whatever that looks like for you. Like retirement, or let me say it this way, not working because you don't have to is a great thing if you put just as much effort into what the Lord is calling you to do and into building the kingdom.
Okay. All right. So on the rich fool, nothing wrong. The wealth came from the land, and it talks about that the land produced well. But so in here then, going to go to Matthew 6:19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. It wasn't a bad thing for the rich farmer to build bigger barns. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that he was going to consume that all for himself. It was for himself here. And so in this concept of laying up treasures in heaven, where Jesus basically tells us, like, don't just store up treasures for yourself here on earth, where he's talking about moth and rust destroy, or thieves break in and steal. I think in today's society, Leo, from our perspective, we'd be saying where fraud takes place, or corruption, or unexpected market turns, or poor decisions, where those are going to destroy the treasures that you've stored up here, and so part of this idea of being dependent on God, I think we have to first decide that being dependent on God is a good thing, which we've established. The Lord says this, so who am I to say anything but that? Yeah. We then need to understand financial safety, financial security is this illusion here. So there is the idea that I have enough money that I don't need to work. Yeah. But that is not security. Mm-hmm. And because many number of things can happen to you that would take away that financial security in a heartbeat. So it's not that financial security is not actual. That's not real in and of itself. Jesus is saying here, store up treasures for yourself in heaven instead, which means giving away things that you, instead of keeping it here just for your consumption.
Well, there's also the matter there of, what actually is a treasure, because
good point.
Jesus ultimately, I should say, hits the nail on the head, but brings the real truth to the surface when he says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And it's not, I guess I would say it this way. Just because you have a lot of things on earth or have a lot of assets doesn't mean that is your treasure. Your treasure is where your heart is. Yeah. Like Jesus says it this way, like where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. But that also means that what your treasure is completely dependent on your heart. Because so you can have the barns with grain overflowing and have to build more barns, but if your treasure is not in those barns, then it's not going to be a problem for you. Yeah. Right. Then you're probably going to execute it in the right way. So Jesus isn't necessarily saying, store up jewels or crowns in heaven, like store up the physical things that like yes, there's a measure of that because we get a reward for the righteous deeds that we do. But he's more so getting down to the more foundational aspect of it, which is your heart will tell you what your treasure is.
Okay.
And so he's saying, don't build up treasures on earth. In other words, don't set your heart on the things that are here on earth. Yeah. I'm not saying don't have them. Saying don't set your heart on them.
Okay. So in this realm here, so if we don't view security as setting up a bigger investment account here, and we choose not to treasure things of this earth, how do we stay dependent on God as wealthy? I'm saying Americans here, talking Americans for the most part. It's surprising how many people around the world watch this, but as wealthy Americans, how do we stay dependent on God when in so many life is so different than a third world country where the spirit seems to be. I haven't been there. I've heard lots and lots of reports about how strong the Christian growth is in third world countries, the way the spirit is moving. I know that in a lot of those areas, they are much more aware of the spiritual realm than we are, but they're also in a lot of ways much more dependent on God than we are. There's persecution that's much more alive and well too, but it can be difficult and to be wealthy in a land of convenience and comfort and everything happening automatically to learn to understand what dependence on God means. If you don't have some strong health condition that causes you to realize just how fragile your life is.
So I think there is very clearly a extra measure of difficulty for maintaining your dependence on God when you are wealthy, and Jesus makes that clear with the rich young ruler,
right?
Or just the parable about the camel going through the eye of a needle. It's like there's an increased responsibility and an increased difficulty to stay dependent on him because it's far easier to manufacture that security on your own when you have money.
Yep.
And so I think where that starts is first understanding all the foundational things that we've already talked about and that you talk about all the time, which is, like we're a steward. This isn't actually ours. Like continually preaching that gospel to yourself every day to remind you and staying really diligent. I mean, really diligent, just as diligent as your prayer life or your time in the word is, where like those are so everyday rhythms. As a wealthy person, it should be an everyday rhythm, an every hour rhythm, reminding yourself, all that I have is the Lord's. All that I have is the Lord's. All that I have is the Lord's. Lord, what do you want to do with what I have?
Yeah.
And tuning your ear to hear his voice about what it is that you like, that you're supposed to do. So to me, that's kind of the start or the foundation of what that means.
Okay.
To as a wealthy person, to stay dependent on the Lord. Because from a material sense, in a purely material sense, you don't need the Lord if you're super wealthy. Right. And so like, it's going to be really easy for our material brains to just slip into a reliance on self instead of reliance on the Lord. And so for the wealthy person, it needs to be an active rhythm of your life to preach the truth to yourself.
And make sure we're not just talking to that other wealthy person.
Yes,
we're talking to you. You right now listening. You are the wealthy person that we're talking to.
Yes.
And Isaac and myself as well. Okay. I want to talk about the dangers of having too much. Not something it's not what's bad about having too much, just the danger of having too much. Mm-hmm. When you think about like one of the common things is how much someone needs to feel safe in their just in case account, their emergency fund. While we say, okay, Dave Ramsey says 3 to 6 months of savings put up, of expenses saved up, and that is your emergency fund. And I got older, my expenses grew, so I need a large emergency fund. Well, that's okay. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be more and more of somewhat of a percentage of net worth. And so where I used to feel comfortable with $2,000 in my savings account, then it grew to 20, then it was 200. And then it actually it's 2 million.
Yeah.
And so this is a common thing. And if you're only at the 20 stage, don't just look at the person with 2 million and say, well, silly that they did this.
Right.
We're all in the same boat here. So
yeah, I remember when I had $2,000 in my account and I thought like, this is the best, I'm rich. Well, yeah. Now if my account got down to $2,000, which it has in the past, it's like, oh, okay. Like we're getting real tight. We got bills that are coming, all of those things. So it does change.
So part one of the dangers that I'm seeing with this of having too much is it's so easy for your money to be your safety blanket instead of needing God. Kind of what we talked about there. I don't want that to be redundant, but I think this concept of I trust. It's easy to say, of course I trust in the Lord for everything. God's my source. Mm-hmm. And then we put $2,000 in your account and we tell you you've got $10,000 or $20,000 of expenses this month. And what do you do? And where, what feelings stir up inside of you? So that I kind of want to speak to that. The feelings that stir up inside when someone thinks about that. If you're listening to this and saying, what if you had 20% of what you needed for this upcoming month? That kind of feeling, like, how do I check my heart there? How do I grow in that place when I'm realizing that the feelings of anxiety or anything else that come over me, fear?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess one thing I would say is that God gives us our emotions for a reason. And we take something like anxiety or fear and always make it a sin, or we tend to
God says, don't fear and don't be anxious.
Correct. However, there are healthy feels and there are healthy anxieties. For instance, we just had a tornado warning. There's a certain part of us that says, okay, maybe I should, not just walk outside, even though we did walk outside and take a peek. But from that perspective, there's a health, if that were to happen, there's a healthy level of fear and anxiety that you should have that says, okay, I need to figure out, I need to use everything under the disposal that the Lord has given me.
Yep.
To try to figure this out. Like it's the same idea of multiplication, except like we're called to multiply, except I'm multiplying to survive, not just multiplying to multiply.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that, so there's a weight that comes with having to satisfy the responsibilities that I'm required to satisfy, like my bills to the bank, the promises that I've made to people about the money that I will pay them, like my mortgage or my car, putting food on the table for my family. Like that is a real responsibility and weight that I need to carry. However, that just because there's a weight or a responsibility there doesn't mean that it's fully dependent on me to get that done. I still need to rely on the Lord to give the provision or to honor the work that I'm doing, or to give me favor in whatever area he wants to give me favor in order to make that provision happen.
Yeah.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then how does the person who has, let's say, 10 times more than their monthly expenses sitting there in cash right now, how do they stay dependent on God?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, goes back to the fundamentals of understanding exactly where that 10x came from and exactly where that 10x can go.
Okay.
Right. So it's realizing, having a real humility about the fact that I have 10x my monthly responsibilities right now doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be there. Okay. And that it's ultimately the Lord that sustains us. So that's number one. Number two, from a practical standpoint, give away a whole heck of a lot more than you currently are.
Yeah.
And be okay with it.
Yeah.
Give away more than you are. Now, that doesn't mean that having 6 months worth of, your liabilities stocked up is a bad idea at all. In fact, it's a great idea.
Sure.
From a practical and a wise and a prudent or a shrewd standpoint. However, real dependence on the Lord is not having a lock on that safe. That is my safety net per se, right? It's real dependence on the Lord is not saying, okay, like I have 6 months of expenses set up over here. I'm going to lock that and never, ever, ever touch it, no matter what happens. That's not dependence on the Lord. Dependence on the Lord is, yes, it's wise to set that aside, but that sucker never has a lock on it. Because if you're actually submitted to the Lord and the Lord tells you, actually, there's a a gift that I want you to give somebody, or there's a mission that I have for you that's going to require you to sacrifice that, will you depend on me? And your answer needs to be yes. Does that make sense?
It does.
So you can have 6 months or 60 years of reserves saved up. You can just never have it in a locked safe.
So I was thinking about, you often talk about your story into the entrepreneurial journey of living with an open hand, and you had everything so under control, but then the Lord called you to live with an open hand. On our website, on the stewardship page, we have the picture of this guy sitting there with an open hand. And I just think that really, to me, that is the real financial freedom. Yep. Financial freedom is not about how much more you have than your responsibilities. Yep. Financial freedom is the ability to live with an open hand there.
Yeah.
And that is, it goes back to this upside down kingdom. Jesus says that the first will be last, and the greatest among you will be the servant. Proverbs talks a lot about wisdom and prudence, and wisdom and prudence says have 6 months of your savings or of your expenses saved up and or more. But then just going thought of this with Jesus here of at that time, Jesus declared, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding. In translation, some say prudent, the wise and prudent, and revealed them to little children. For yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. And this idea that living open-handed, that is actual financial freedom.
Yep.
The ability to say, like, God, it's yours. I trust you. And if you take it all from me, or you instruct me to give it all, you ask me to give it all. To the rich young ruler who Jesus said, the one thing you lack is to go get rid of everything and come follow me. And there's a number of different ways you can grab meaning from that, but it's upside down from our concept of practicality. And so I just think that is the ultimate freedom. Yeah. That is the ultimate way to stay dependent on God. That's the ultimate way to release yourself from the grip of mammon, is to live open-handed and say, Lord, it's all yours. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not to demonize or to call building things up sinful. It's do those things control you? Maybe I'll say it this way. If there is a non-negotiable in your life when it comes to your walk with Christ, like that thing is a problem. It needs to be cut out. And so if you're 6 months or 3 months or 6 years or whatever it is of financial security is a non-negotiable I would never be willing to do X because that would tear into this, or I would never dig into my retirement account because then I have to pay extra taxes or penalties. And so that's just dumb. I should never do that. Like if that's a non-negotiable, that is an idol in your life that needs to be destroyed. It just does.
I'm so sick of hearing I can't use my retirement funds because I'll pay the penalty.
No. Yes, I don't feel good about giving the government penalty either. I don't feel good about it. I feel a lot less good about disobeying the Lord. A whole lot less good. So like when before I started my entrepreneurial journey, I would have definitely said, I would have been one of those people that said, no, like I'm not going to, drain my retirement account and pay penalties to go do X, Y, Z, or I'm not going to allow my bank account to dip below, 6 months worth of funds. Yeah. Like I was one of those people. And, now, while it doesn't mean that it's easy, it doesn't mean that it's not painful at times, but those things drive you to the cross. I mean, to be perfectly transparent, I'm worth half as much now as I was, 3.5 years ago, almost actually about 4 years ago now. Yeah. I'm worth half as much. Like I have definitely dipped into those things in order to pursue obedience to the Lord. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm called to take that all the way to zero. It means I'm called to continually listen to the Lord in obedience to say, am I to continue pursuing this path? And if the answer is yes, then that means that my reliance on my 6 months worth of finances needs to die.
Yeah.
Right.
Been there. Okay. The very last hard question I have for you in this podcast, at least for this season until we decide to do some more episodes later. You've been a fantastic contributor here and truly appreciate what you have shared. If you have one last message to give the listeners, whether it be financial or not, what would you share with them?
Fully devote yourself to the Lord and to his word.
What does that mean?
That means that that your greatest treasure and your greatest pursuit should be to understand the Lord and to please him. And the way that you do that is through reading his word and through spending time with him and understanding what he's requiring of you. Everything else will flow from that. Everything. And it will be hard, and it will be difficult, and it will be challenging. But fully devote yourself to pursuing the Lord and fully devote yourself to obeying him no matter what he says.
Very good. Very good. My mind is going to something I've been talking about a number of times lately of don't lie to yourself. So just because you say, oh yeah, no, I devote myself to the Lord and the word. And it's just, I think you will know when you are fully devoted to it. And you'll know that you're like, I'm not devoted enough. I need more. I think it is, from my understanding so far, as I keep trying to go deeper and deeper, I'm realizing
you'll never find the end of him.
Yeah, well, yeah, not the end of him, but just I don't know where fully devoted, what that line is, that threshold that I finally clear. Okay, now I'm fully devoted. Yeah, and just because I know what I would have said to you 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Yeah, I'm totally devoted to the Lord. I read there's like 3 times a week where I'll read a devotional for 10 minutes. Yeah. And I listen to sermons, and it's just like, the further you go into it. I mean, I'm, I don't know, 50 or 100 times more actual time spent with the Lord than I was then. And I'm sitting here now saying like, there's got to be so much more of me to actually be fully devoted. So last thing, then speak to me or to anyone who's somewhere in that position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Devotion is not a destination. Like devotion is a journey. I mean, if you think about it in any walk of your life, most people that listen to this are probably married. Like if you are fully devoted to your wife, that is a never ending journey about walking out what that devotion means.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the covenant, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no matter what, I am with this woman. I actually just saw a reel today from, it's a guy that people would know from the real estate world, a Christian. And he heard a quote from somebody else that said, you will have 5 marriages in your life. Just try to make it all to the same woman. Mm-hmm. Right. It's like, you have one marriage where like it's before kids, it's just you guys. And like, that's one marriage. You have kids. That's a very different marriage. And a lot of people don't make it out of that marriage. Right. You have slightly older kids. That's a different marriage. You have adult children, but maybe they're still in the house. That's a different marriage. You have, now you're empty nesters. That's a different marriage.
Yeah.
Now you're grandparents, and like, that's a different marriage. Like you're old, your bodies probably don't work as well anymore. Like, so that's what devotion means. Devotion is not a destination. Devotion is a never ending pursuit.
Okay.
And so that's what I would say. That's what I would say to people. Like it is a never ending pursuit of the Lord. And if you do that and devote yourself to that, then all of these other things will fall into place. They will make more sense. It's not going to be easy, but they will make more sense.
Seek ye first the kingdom, and all these other things will be added unto you.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm stepping out of line by saying, dial up your devotion. You can probably turn it up more. Keep turning it up. Not from a legalistic standpoint, from a he's worth it standpoint.
Yeah. And it's not even just from a time standpoint, because you probably have had more time previously than you do now. And you will have a different amount of time later than you do now. But we can go back to the matter of treasure. It's like, how much do you treasure this time? I had a buddy who was in the Marines, and during boot camp, they literally had no time. Some days he had a little more time than others. Some days he said, I had time to read a single Bible verse in the day. And I would hang on to that verse for 24 hours until I could get back into the word again. And like, that's what devotion is.
Yeah.
Like devotion is not time. Devotion is like, this is the thing that sustains me. And even if it's just a couple words, like I am going to cling to that like life itself.
Okay. That's so good. Isaac Schafer. Thank you, brother.
You're welcome. We'll do it again sometime.
But for now, 9 episodes left. We'll see you next week, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you again for listening to Wealth Well Done. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player, and together we'll continue to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well.